I'm Justin.
Hey, Justin.
Well, Merry Christmas and it's nice to meet you. Thank you for coming to our house.
Of course, thank you for opening it up to so many people. This is amazing.
Well, the wing you just entered is, I'm the owner. I live here.
Yes.
Me and my partner, and I'm very blessed to be the steward of this house. The wing you just entered contains a breakfast room, this room, and the kitchen and the pantry. It was originally an attached wing to house the enslaved people that Soldini owned. Mm-hmm. This home and the Natchitoches house have the only still attached slave wings in Natchitoches. After Reconstruction, mostly throughout the South, slave wings were torn down. People, they were oddly purposed rooms. A lot of times people paid property taxes on those rooms, and there were bad memory. People were wanting to move on, and so they would tear them down. And so this is only this house and the Natchitoches house that still have them. In the courthouse records,
you say that they're attached to the home of their house.
Yes, meaning a wing of the house, attached slave wing, right? As opposed to an outbuilding. In the courthouse records, you'd see that Joseph Soldini paid property taxes on 15 enslaved people. We don't know how many lived in this part of this house and how many may have lived in other outbuildings here on the property, but we do know that some did. But those were the individuals that fired and laid the brick and hammered the nails and plastered the walls to build this structure and so much of Natchitoches. And in the 20s, these quarters were converted into the rooms you see today. This wonderful set of china is by Booth, an English china maker. And over the doors, a set of plates by Clementine Hunter, primitive artist from Melrose Plantation. Melrose was somewhat of an art colony, and Clementine Hunter was a housekeeper there, and she was cleaning up after these artists, and there were painting materials, paints and brushes and materials, and so she began to dabble with the paints, and there you go. That was the genesis of her career. The one on the left is interesting. It shows that was her vernacular for good angels and bad angels. Good angels were dressed in white, and bad angels were dressed in red, and which is I don't know why that would be, except maybe the devil wears red pajamas or something. I don't know. He's a red guy, I guess. But what dominates the room is this bust of Abraham Lincoln. He was our tallest president at 6'4", when the average man was 5'6", which is my height. And this shelf was made such that his head is at the height it would be if he were standing in the room with us right now. Wow. Wearing a half-inch heel. And especially when you consider the stovepipe hat, he was quite an imposing figure. And we acquired this bust and the cast of his hand from the New York Historic Society. They have the original mold taken from the life mask that was taken of him the day he won the Republican nomination for president. And again, in the hand, clutching a broomstick, that is the right hand that signed the Emancipation Proclamation that turned the people, the human beings that lived in this slave wing, into our fellow citizens. And which was a monumental world event. Yes. And above the bust is an example of the china that was used in the Lincoln White House. Mary Todd Lincoln chose that color because it was popular in Paris at the time. In the 1800s, the most popular publication in the country was Harper's Weekly, and here's an actual original of the Christmas issue of Harper's Weekly from December 31st of 1864. Thomas Nast illustrated both the cover and the inside, and Nast and Harper's were for the Union cause. Right. This is Christmas morning, and it shows the mother and the father and the 7 children with lots of toys. This little fella has his backpack and his mess kit and his army hat and his place sword and his drum, and they all have toys. And this would be fairly typical of a northern Christmas. It was not that way in the South. People were starving to death here. And the children in Natchitoches Parish, for the most part, were told that Santa couldn't get through the blockade. When you get to the centerfold here, this is especially poignant, especially the Christmas message, the Union Christmas dinner. And it says, peace on earth, goodwill toward men. Consider that in the context of the violence and death and war that was everywhere in everyone's life at the time.
Right.
It was a horrendous time in our country. And but what you have here is Lincoln beckoning those without to come inside and join. And if you see, the empty chairs each bear the initials of the state: North Carolina, South Carolina, and so forth on down. He is, those who would could come back to the table. And we have these vignettes that all portend a Union victory. This and like here we have victory holding out an olive branch to submission. The biblical story of the prodigal son returning home. This I find the most moving. It says, "Lay down your arms and you will be welcome." And it shows Union soldiers welcoming Southern soldiers as countrymen once more. Reconciliation. Here you have a joyous event where they're toasting all the soldiers and sailors. But this is the most interesting. It says unconditional surrender, and it shows Lee surrendering to Grant 3.5 months before Lee actually surrendered to Grant. This is foretelling. This is an artist's imagination, Thomas Manasseh's imagination of what this event would look like. Indeed, it did not look anything like that, and here's why. Lee showed up early at the Appomattox courthouse for the surrender. It was supposed to take place whatever time of day it was supposed to take place, and he showed up early. And Grant was not ready. Lee was always dressed in all this drag, all this big whoopie that he wore everywhere. But Grant was so anxious to get this surrender done that when he heard that Lee had arrived, he jumped up and not have his coat on, his tie, all this stuff. He jumped up and ran outside in his shirt sleeves, and they executed the surrender without. And Grant looked nothing like in this picture right here. Yeah. He was a mess at the time that he actually did it.
Wow.
So
I had no idea.
So Lee actually was surrendered to Grant April the 9th of 1865, and then Lincoln was murdered 5 days later. So it would be over a century before the descendants of those that lived in these rooms would realize more of the full promise of emancipation. But as you visit beautiful homes on the tour this weekend, remember those who lived out their lives, who lived and died building America, building Louisiana, building Natchitoches, literally building it.
Absolutely.
And the legacy that we get to enjoy today.
That's true.
All right.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Okay, thank you.
Opening your home.